My name is Serik Bemenbetov. I am the Vice Rector for Research at the German Kazakh University, and I am the organizer of this event today. So the topic of our talk today is, let me check, it's a wonderfully absurd world of car-centric urban planning. And for this DKU-Talk, we have invited Dr. Tom Assman, who is a lead researcher at the Institute for Logistics and Material Systems at Otto von Guericke University, Magdeburg in Germany. Tom researches urban logistics, sustainable logistics, and autonomous micro-vehicles. And according to the CV, Tom is committed to a carbon-neutral world and livable cities. Here at German Kazakh University, Tom is leading a project on cargo bikes, and I hope in a few seconds, Tom will explain to us what the cargo bike is and what is the potential of using cargo bikes in urban environment. And next to Tom, we have invited Alikhan Kusherbayev, who will moderate our conversation, our talk today. Alikhan is a director of the Kazakhstan Urban Community. This non-profit organization works to improve the quality of life in our cities. Alikhan, please correct me if I'm wrong. This includes making our streets traffic safe, designing coding houses, and preserving historical heritage and urban development. So colleagues, I hope I haven't missed anything, no important information about you. So gentlemen,
no, sorry, everything's fine, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So gentlemen, very warm welcome to you, and thank you that you have agreed to join us for this DKU-Talk. The floor or the microphone is yours.
Okay, so let us start. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alikhan, and Mr. Bemenbetov already introduced me. So let us start. Today's session is about the great topic of our cities. It's the wonderful world of car-centric urban planning. And I would like to thank again the Kazakh-German University for creating this session and inviting all of us. And our speaker for today's session is Doctor of Engineering Tom Assman, a research group lead at the Institute of Logistics and Material Handling Systems at the Otto von Guericke University in Magdeburg. And Dr. Assman and his team are researching autonomous cargo bikes and vehicles, e-mobility and e-logistics. Their target is to create smart and sustainable logistical systems for the future. Now I'm passing my words to Dr. Assman, and if you have other questions, we'll have a Q&A session at the end of the lecture, and you can write your questions into the chat, and then we will bring them to the speaker. So Dr. Assman, please.
Hello, and also a very warm welcome from my side. It is a pleasure for me to be able to speak here, and it's a pleasure for me to have a discussion with you afterwards and to talk a bit about how cities evolved and especially how we can change cities for a better. What we are actually talking about today is the wonderful absurd world of car-centric urban planning. If we are talking about how we can change urban mobility, how we can make urban transportation more green, more environmental friendly, more safe, then we also have to discuss and analyze how it did happen that most of our public spaces in cities are actually dominated by cars. And we will discuss this, and after the Q&A sessions, I hope we also will have the chance to have a short discussion about the first cargo bike in Kazakhstan. Today, in the presentation itself, we will focus on cars and how cars changed our cities. Especially, we will cover three topics. Firstly, we will briefly look into how cars became the dominant mode of transport in most of the cities worldwide. And secondly, we will analyze what makes this, how this did affect cities and how it affected the social life of cities. And thirdly, we will think about some solutions how we can create streets where people can live instead of just roads for cars. And let's start directly with the first thing. How did cars to start to innovate and to change cities? And cities are not built for cars originally. So if you look at old cities also, if you look at how Almaty evolved, they were built around people walking. Later on, they were built around public transport systems. And with the beginning of the 20th century, starting in the United States of America, cars started to become the planning paradigm, and everything was planned about the car, was planned around the car. And this movement then spread from the United States to Europe and to the rest of the world. And there had been some success factors why this worked out very well, that one mode of transport became the dominant. And two things you may know from your everyday life, because this is the advertisement. It's a key value proposition of car manufacturers. It's safety and it's freedom. The freedom to just take your car and to ride wherever you want, whenever you want. And actually, if you look at the BMWs, also at the speed you want. This is a promise they give you. Actually, they cannot really fulfill this promise because you're stuck in congestion, cannot drive as fast as the car can go, but it's a promise and they are successful in delivering this promise. And secondly, they're telling you you're safe inside the car. And riding a car is a safe mode to go from A to B. Nobody will disturb you. Nobody will come into your car. If you have an accident, you are safe within your car. So these are two main value propositions, but they are not sufficient to explain why cars became the dominant. It's also that the entire city planning started to be made around cars. On the left-hand side, you can see the plan for a city made by Bernhard von Reichow, one of the most influential urban planners and transport engineers in Germany. And you can see actually are streets. And they were designed in a way that they were organic, that you had no intersections or no intersections where cars really need to stop at traffic lights. And it was everything built that you have a very smooth flow of traffic. Traffic means cars. And even the principle of houses and where houses are located followed this idea of a car-oriented transportation grid. And on the right-hand side, this is from Colin Bachenman, Cities and Transport in Cities, the most influential city planner in the UK. And what you can see here is that actually there's one level of a city designated for cars. And you have this one level, and it should kind of be kept free from everything else because you need to have the free flow of cars and everything is built somewhere around it. So you had this principles of how to build a city around cars. And actually, the both things I just showed are the predecessors to Futurama. Futurama, you can see it on the right-hand side, had been a large-scale model of a future city. Therefore, Futurama, it has nothing to do with the TV show. It had been a model of its own. It was presented at the 1933 New York World's Fair, built by General Motors and other car companies. And it was built to really demonstrate how the future city should look like, with very large freeways, with this skyscrapers. And actually, if you look at it, you have skyscrapers, you have some green areas with some trees, and you have freeways. This is what the city is about, the Futurama city. And the things which make a city very interesting. Small, narrow streets, some plazas, and so on. They're completely gone away. It's very large distances between buildings, very high buildings, and everything just connected with cars. And because it had been one of the most influential world fairs, and during this time, and people really could walk around and above this model, it made a big impact on the perception of how a city and should look like, and how we as a society should move ourselves in it with this new mode of transport, during this time, the car. This makes it so successful because it really changed the perception of a city and how it should look like. And then there had been some very successful instruments to implement this. First is strong zoning regulations. So to say, in certain areas of the city, you can just build one family houses, and in the other area, you can just build industrial areas. The third one, you can just build this one. So really to separate cities and to make it clear that cities are separated in different functions. The single family home itself is a great means to probably car use, because if you have these suburban areas, you cannot really use public transport. You cannot really walk. Suburban areas are dominant, are made for car use. And the one single family house is, if you look in the advertisement of car companies, again, you have the one single family house, you have the parking, and you have a car in front of it. They belong together, both. And to promote this form of living, you promote car use. And then they implemented transport engineering programs, which made strong standards on how roads have to be built and how streets have to be built. And once implemented, people followed it. And lastly, the destruction of public transport. So this is what really happened. On the right-hand side, this is the Big Tram gate, which happened in the United States of America. So this is photos from 1956, and it shows tramways which were bought by General Motors and then destroyed. The United States car companies really bought systematically tramway companies just to destroy them in order to sell cars. And on the left-hand side, what you can see, some of you may remember, this is the tramway from Almaty. And also in Almaty had a tramway, but it had to make space for cars and partly also for cycling paths, as I was told, but instead of extending such a system, it was destroyed, and this is a pity. So this is where we come from. This is how, in the last decades, cities changed from a place which was basically built around walking, public transport, and cycling to a place which is dominated by car. And this means that there are some pretty interesting facts and some absurd results coming along with it. Here you can see two photos of Almaty I took yesterday and today. You look on a street, and what you can see, you look on a street and actually you look on a road, and you look on asphalt, and what you see is basically space for cars. And here on the right hand side, if you just look at the distribution of space, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, I think it's even 5 lanes for cars. And it's very tiny lane for cyclists, which maybe is not even as wide as a car lane, and you have to go both directions. This is a bit absurd. And it's not just the case that this is from Almaty. Those are two photos from my hometown, Magdeburg. And actually also here in Magdeburg, you can see this is a street, and what you can see on the street is asphalt, is traffic, and that's it. In contrast to Almaty, you cannot even see trees here. Maybe at the far end of it, but not here. On the right-hand side, what you see is a parking lot. This is a parking lot of a shopping center. It's empty. It's a huge waste of space. And it's not just that you need the space for cars to move, you also need the space for cars to park. And you need a space for cars to park at your home. You need a space for a car to park at your workplace. And then you need at least another space to park a car at the place where you go shopping, where you go for sport, where you do leisure activities, and so on. So you need around 3 parking lots for 1 car. And this does cost a lot of space in cities, and it results also to such an overuse of space, which is actually not really needed. And if you look into some figures, there had been a study in Germany. In cities, people have an average. This is in Germany, a living space of 46 square meters per person, and a space for transportation of around 224 square meters, 5 times more. And think about what you do. You basically you live, but what you do is to allocate most of the space to traffic and to transportation. And this is a strong difference. And if you would translate this into how we build our flats, how we would design our flats, they would look like this. We have a big garage for a car. Actually, there's enough space around that we can even put a second, a third, a fifth car into it. And then we have some minor space for a kitchen, the dining room, the living room, and the bedroom. But actually, everything is built around the car, and this is what dominates our living space. And a city is not just a city is the place where we live. It's our flat, but it's also the entire city we spend most of our time. And this distribution of space is something we can also put into numbers, and we can visualize it. So unfortunately, this figure or this graph is not in English, but I will explain it briefly. If you are a pedestrian and you walk with the speed of 4 kilometers per hour, then you need around 1 square meter in order to move safely from A to B. If you are a cyclist and you move with the speed of 30 kilometers an hour, which is pretty fast for cyclists, you need already 41 square meter because you need some distance to the person in front of you, in the back of you, in order that you not overrun somebody. And if you then look into a car, you already need 65 square meter if you run at 30 kilometers. In Germany, basically cars are operated at 50 kilometers per hour within the major roads of a city. Then it's already 104 square meter you need for a car to drive. So you have a car, and around it there are 140 square meter free space. This is much. I think it's more than your flat is large. But this is what we allocate to cars, that they can move at 50 kilometers per hour. And this is pretty much, and this is a bit of absurd to do this if you compare it to our living space. And this also results in some funny effects. And if you look at those big streets in a city, it's not really easy to cross it. Those big streets where cars run at 50, sometimes even 60 kilometers per hour, you cannot cross it as a pedestrian. You need to have special intersections with traffic lights or something where you can cross. I learned in Almaty it works a bit different. We come to this later on, but at least in Germany and most European cities, you as a pedestrian are forced to the sidewalk, and then you have even cars parking on the sidewalk. So this is what is kind of the reality. You cannot really use a street, and you cannot even really use the sidewalks. This is because we attribute so much space to cars. It could be different. There are the internet, you can find many different versions of this photo. On the left-hand side, if you transport 60 people with a car, this is the space you need. If you do it by bus, it's the space in the middle, and if you do it with a bicycle, it's also way less space you need than if you do it by cars. It just makes it obvious how much space is wasted for cars. And the waste of space is not the only thing. It's also safety what makes it absurd. So cars are the most unsecure means of transport. And instead of thinking, okay, how can we make cars more safe? What society currently is doing is to make cars more and more unsafe for people outside the car. Within the car, you are safe. But if you look at the outside of the car, this is what happens if you make SUVs bigger and bigger and bigger. You cannot see, as a driver, you cannot see those children sitting in front of you. Just imagine you're riding a vehicle and actually you do not see what is in front of you. You push the gas, you start to ride, and then you run over because somebody built the car in a way that you could not see the child. But this is the reality. This is what makes it so absurd, and we are not going for better at this point. And it's also speed. If you look at the chance of death, if you go at 50 kilometers per hour, which is the standard speed in cities in most European cities, the chance of death if a car hits a pedestrian is 80.5%. If you lower the speed, then it decreases rapidly. But still, at least in Germany, I think in Almaty it's 40 kilometers per hour. This is way better, as you can see. So it's actually a good situation here. You lower the chance that people die significantly. And at least in Germany, people still stay with this 50 kilometers for some absurd reason, because it's obviously killing people. And this leads us to the wonderful aspect that people always think we need to be faster in order to save time. But this is kind of a miracle that you save time when you make traffic faster, because science tells us that people are spending actually the same amount of time each year on transportation. This is the hours per person per year spent on transportation. And you can see it's kind of in the same corridor over the last decades. So what happens is that if you increase the speed and you keep your urban form, the shape of your city, the same, the assumption is that if you have the same size of a city and you make transportation faster, then you spend less time on transportation and you have more quality time. So more time you can spend on working, on relaxing with your family or something else. This is the assumption. But the reality is, because people spend the same time on transportation each year, is that you have higher speed and you have constant time spent on traffic, what just leads to a stronger urbanization, suburbanization, because people are willing to travel longer distances, and because they are traveling more within a city, you get more accidents, you get higher costs, and you do not have more time. It's just that you have more traffic in a city. And to put it in a nutshell, this means making urban transportation faster means to replace short, safe, and cheap connections between parts of a city or people, longer, more unsafe, and more expensive. And this is kind of absurd. You could have it short, safe, and cheap, but we are doing the opposite. And this is the vicious circle of car-centric planning. You have a city center, and where car use is increasing. This city center becomes less attractive, therefore people move out to the suburbs, and then people use car to the city more often. And this is fueled by this idea that it makes sense to increase or to look for fluent and easy traffic in cities. And this is something that should be changed in order to create a sustainable and a livable city. And the other interesting point is, if you look at the concept of effective speed. Effective speed means not how long it takes you to go from A to B. It also incorporates that actually you have to work for a certain time in order to be able to afford your means of transport. So you need to work a lot of hours in order to buy a Mercedes. You do not need to work very long to buy just a bike. And if you incorporate this in your speed, then the average speed of a Mercedes is 2 kilometers per hour. The average speed of a bicycle is 16 kilometers per hour. So actually, as a human being, you're faster with a bike and you have more time than with a car and a prestigious car. This is an interesting concept to make clear how much time actually we waste on cars. I will use some more minutes to briefly cover the function of a street to tell how we can change it, and then we will go into the discussion. There, in English, it's more clear than in German, but there's a difference in the term street and the term road. A street is everything between the buildings, so the entire public space between those buildings. And a road actually is just the space which is allocated for cars and designated for cars to move and to park. What you can see here is the same street before and after. On the right hand side, this had been this street as a road, just to go down with a car or to park the car. On the left hand side, this is the same street, but in this case, it is really a street where people can walk around, where they can enjoy time, and so on. And this is the first thing we should think about. Are we talking about roads or are we talking about streets? And the street has way more functionalities it needs to fulfill than a road. A street actually is a public space. A street is the place where people living in the city, houses around the street, living or working at the shops around, where they relax, where they chill, where they chat, where they meet friends, where they do business, where they have a coffee, where they maybe even do some gardening, and especially where they can walk freely and safely, so not fearing to be overrun by a car. This is the basic concept of a street and of a livable street. And a road is basically built for cars and is optimized for the free flow of traffic and where speed matters. So those are two different concepts. And most of the time, when we are talking about a street, actually we are talking about a road, and where we need to come to create livable and sustainable cities is to talk about a street as a place for people. And there are some examples, this is from Copenhagen, where already this mind change happened. So this is Copenhagen in the 60s, and this is Copenhagen right now. It's the same streets, not the same perspective, but those are the same streets. And they changed from a road to a street. And they made space for people to walk. And actually they made space for many retailers, small companies, and so on to also earn a good living with those concepts of changing a city. Here, this is another example of having a parking lot and now having a public space where people do business, where they earn money and they do not just park some steel. And one of the most important principles is to create such streets is the 880 principle by Jan Gehl, which basically states that if you design a street, you have to design a street in a way that a child at the age of 8 and elderly people at the age of 80 can use the street safely and nobody has to fear about it. And having this in mind helps a lot to create cities. And the other rule of thumb is to change priorities in urban planning, to not plan for cars, to plan for pedestrians firstly, to plan for the most vulnerable people on the street, pedestrians and cyclists, and public transport, taxi, car, and at the end even for an airplane, and also to rethink public transport. Enrique Peñalosa, former mayor of Bogota, once said, innovative city is not a city where the less well-off drive a car, it is a city where the rich use public transport. This is what we need to keep in mind when designing cities and public transport. And one thing I asked myself tomorrow when I was walking to the university is actually, how well is Almaty doing in this respect? And I had to recognize prioritizing pedestrians, it is a thing in this city. On the left-hand side, this is a pedestrian crossing without a traffic light, and what works very well here. This is amazing for me. Yes, we just crossed at the pedestrian crossing, and the street can have 4 or 5 lanes. Every car will stop. And this is a priority for pedestrians. And it makes it safe and easy for people to use such a street and to cross the street. And this is a good step forward. The second positive point, and actually you can never do this in Germany, never try it. The other positive thing I found are traffic lights and how long it takes for pedestrian to cross the street. Basically, you have this time count here, and the longest time count I found for pedestrians had been 40 seconds till now. In Germany, it can happen that you have to wait for at least 1.5 minutes as a pedestrian to be able to cross the street or the road. Here, you are prioritizing pedestrians very often in a high frequency. They can cross such a road, and this is good, and it's a good step forward. And what I also like very much is you have a kind of secure separation. You have very wide roads which are dominated by cars, but then there's kind of a safe area, and then there are wide pedestrian walks and also shops and restaurants and so on, and a lot of green zone. Here, besides the road, there is a focus on making the street pedestrian friendly, and it has a lot of details and it fulfills many criteria of being a nice and usable street, but still there's this very large road in between which favors cars and leads to actually quite a high air pollution, which you really can smell. But it's doing better. This is a cycling path in Almaty I found yesterday. And honestly, in Berlin, it needed the COVID pandemic to build such cycling paths protected by bollards. And Magdeburg is still nobody builds it, and to have a cycling path which you can see until the horizon, it's also very difficult to find where I come from. So to sum it up, it is absurd what we are doing to cities with favoring cars. We can do way better, and I think cities and many people start to prioritize pedestrians and public transport more, and I think we will reach more livable cities pretty soon, and I think also Almaty has a very good starting point to do so.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Assman. It was a pleasant speech, and I really enjoyed, especially the part when you really delivered a nice speech about Almaty. And all of us here, I think, are fond of the city. And now we have the Q&A session, so you can ask your questions. And if you have one, do not hesitate to turn on your microphones and videos, and you can ask Dr. Assman right now.
Are we living the trend for car dominance in the world, and what about the United States?
The United States are the prototype for car-oriented and car-dominant urban planning. And if you look at a map of the United States, what you can see are huge, really huge suburban areas. So if you look at a map between Boston and Philadelphia, which is a very long distance, basically it's pretty difficult to find an area where you do not find suburbs in between those cities. So they really destroyed parts of their country by just building car-oriented forms of living, but also the United States are moving towards more sustainable and more people-friendly ways. And if you look at Portland, for example, or Boston, they are really rebuilding a city to be pedestrian-friendly. Or New York City, the amount of cycling paths they are building each year is enormous. So people also there start to change, as they are heavily investing in urban transport systems, in tramways and cycling paths in order to make a difference.
Thank you for your answer. I think Damir Kaliyev received a good answer. So we also have some questions that were sent to us through the social media, and allow us to ask Dr. Assman. So what are the economical benefits of smart transportations for the cities? That's one.
If you look into the economics of a city and transportation, you have to look at direct and indirect costs. Direct costs are the costs a city or the private user pay directly for using a certain mode of transport. So the direct cost of buying a bike is to buy the bike. The direct cost of riding a car is to pay the fuel. And then there are the indirect costs or the external costs. Those are the costs covered by society. And in terms of a car, those are the costs for air pollution and the health issues coming through air pollution. Those are the costs for carbon dioxide emissions and fighting against climate change. Those are the costs for everybody who's run over by a car. This costs money for a society. And if you look at this external costs, and also the costs for the infrastructure and also the infrastructure for cars, you have seen the very huge streets, is not cheap. If you look at all those costs, you will soon recognize that if you go for cycling, if you go for walking, if you go for trams and scooters and other new modern ways of moving people around, those are way cheaper than benefiting cars. And this is money you save in an economy. The money you save in an economy is money you can spend on extending or making your city more livable. And secondly, this is also something which I don't have any evidence for Central Asia, but in Europe, those cities who are favoring alternative modes of transport are also those cities where people really like to do holidays. And you get tours. If people can walk around the city and if they have a lot of things they can enjoy and experience, they will visit your city and they will leave their money in your city. And this is another big benefit.
Thank you. We still have a little bit questions here, and then we will try to reply on the questions from the chat. So one of the most important questions so far is the climate issue. Is the climate issue for biking in here? For example, we have reasonably cold temperatures in here, which are up to -4 degrees. And how to manage the winters here?
I have no experience with such strong winters, but what we can see from cities like Stockholm in Sweden or Uppsala, which is even further north, it's also pretty cold there, but still people cycle. What you need to do is you need to clean your cycling paths from snow and from ice. They are what they are doing is they are firstly cleaning the sidewalks and the cycling paths from snow and ice, and then the roads. And this is what you need to do. And then you can ride securely, and the rest is there's no such thing like bad weather, it's just bad clothing. And just buy some warm clothes and then you can cycle. Actually, you're getting warm, and especially yesterday I was cycling in Almaty and I had to go up the city. If you have to go up the city each morning in the winter, I think you are warm when you arrive at your workplace or somewhere else.
I actually can also add to this. In my hometown of Petropavlovsk, we have also some cold weather, and the coldest day when I was riding was -36, and nothing happened. Like I'm still alive, and my bicycle is okay. Like there is no any normal argument against winter cycling. And in these terms, I really like the examples of Finland or Sweden, which you mentioned. And another, last but not least, question from the audience. Are there any examples in Germany, apart from Magdeburg, where logistical and transport revolutions have taken?
Can you repeat the last sentence, please?
Are there cities in Germany where logistical and transport revolutions have taken place?
We do not have such a thing like transport revolution in Germany. It's a slow, but it's a continuous process, and some cities are faster than other cities. It is happening that especially the large cities, but also in some smaller ones, citizens really start to fight for another way of planning the city and the urban transportation systems. So in Hamburg or in Berlin, you have big civil movements of people who would say, we want to have our neighborhood, or we want to have a large area of the city car-free. And this is a process which really pushes policymakers and also the industry to rethink how they move people within a city. And this movement also leads to the change in urban logistics. So if you talk to the major logistic companies, they are really thinking about what can we do differently? Can we use cargo bikes? Can we use e-scooters or something else to deliver our goods? Because we know that in 5 or 10 years, we won't be able to operate with the same vehicles we are using now in the city. We have to change something, and better we do it now than we are surprised in 3 or 4 years when people really say, no, you cannot enter the city or this neighborhood anymore. And this movement of citizens telling society and policymakers, yeah, we want car-free areas or car-poor areas, makes a change.
Thank you, Dr. Assman. And one of the questions in chat is the next question from Yerasil. In Almaty city, Akimat, the administration, is planning to give part of the central avenues to bikes, where people used to park their cars. And how to solve the problem when all the cars now overcrowd the already narrow exits from the living blocks, since we do not have underground parking available?
This is a wonderful topic. At the end of the day, if you have a well-organized city, you do not need to park a car. Most of your ways you can do with your feet, with your bicycle, with public transport. And then there will be some ways where the car is the best mode of transport, for sure. But the question is if you really want to buy a car, which you just need once or twice a week, or maybe even just once or twice a month. And in those cases, there are car sharing opportunities. I do not actually know if they are available in Almaty. If not, you should start it. Yeah, you can rent a car for an hour, for a day, for a week, easily with your app. Then you just operate the car as you use it. You just pay for the car as you use it. And this makes it very convenient, and having those offers and really building secure alternatives and usable alternatives, good cycling paths, at the end makes it less necessary to own a car, to park a car, and therefore you actually do not need a parking space. Actually, at the end of the day, you can reduce parking space. This is what is happening in Copenhagen, for instance. And you can give this space for people and for green.
Thank you for your presentation. So I really liked it. I like the way you described the rationale for moving from for shifting from traffic-centered urban development to pedestrian-centered urban development. So I like it. It's very much. But in terms of your perceptions of Almaty, as an urban area, you've been here for 2-3 days, and what do you make of the traffic congestion in Almaty? Is it comparable to European cities, or from where you come from? To your town?
On Monday, I had the opportunity to really experience traffic congestion because we went out to the Mega shopping center during rush hour. And I just texted a friend of mine who is in the city council of Magdeburg, and I told her, if somebody in Magdeburg complains about traffic jam and then thinks we could solve this problem by just adding another lane. I will take this person, I will pay this person a flight to Almaty to be able to demonstrate that. Just adding traffic lanes will not solve the problem of congestion. It will just induce more cars. You have high congestion, especially through rush hour. And I think it's more than, at least in the city I live in, but it's a solvable issue. And I have seen many examples where in Almaty you have bus lanes, that you make new bus lanes, and we even have the bus lane in the middle of the street to really have something like a bus rapid transport system. So going this way will, at the end of the day, solve the congestion issue.
Don't you think that the part of Almaty's problem is that most of our middle class, economically active population lives in the downtown, not in the suburbs like we have it in America or in European countries. So, this creates a lot of traffic congestion. So, because most of our middle class use cars, or yes, and as a result, so more cars we have in downtown rather than on the outskirts.
Yeah, but actually, if people already live in the inner city area, this is perfect. This is a perfect starting position, because if you already live...
It's not the European model, or the model that we see in the United States, where the most middle class live outside, outside of the downtown.
Yeah, and this makes it so if you have people living outside the city and working inside the city, they have to go into the city for long distances, so they need a car, and they have to go out. And all the cars accumulate in the city center. This causes major problems. If you have a city center, large one, where you have the workplaces and the residence places somewhere around it, this is a perfect starting position to say, yeah, come on, you can walk, you can cycle, you can take a taxi if it's raining, you can take the bus. This is a perfect starting position to build a beautiful town. And Almaty is already a beautiful town. I really like it to walk down the streets.
This is a nice words of Penaloza, Enrique Penaloza, who said, what was he saying? How to urge rich people to use public transport? Yes, I think it's also part of our problem in Almaty, that we can't urge, our rich people to use public transport. Our city authorities try to do this. Try to urge more people to use public transport, but I think they're not successful in that regard. From your experience, how you showed the example of Copenhagen. How they did it in Copenhagen.
The point is, I experience it sometimes in Berlin, that people use public transport. So they do it if you have to go for longer distances, and if it is inconvenient to use a car. So if you are faster with public transport and way more fast, then you're going to use public transport. If it is way cheaper to use public transport, and also rich people are looking after money, than using the car. And for instance, if you have to pay, let's say, 10,000 tenge to park a car somewhere, or 1,000 tenge an hour to park a car, then you really think about maybe I can go with public transport because it's cheaper, it's faster, and if you then work on high quality, reliable public transport where we have good seats in it, where you maybe have Wi-Fi so that you can read your news in between, some people start to change. It's always a matter of sticks and carrots. So you need carrots, but you also need some sticks to to motivate people to use something else in a car.
Actually, I recommend to you, Dr. Assman, to visit the western and northern, not the northern, but the western and southern parts of Almaty. They are the complete opposite of the central city. like the outskirts of the city are the most terrible parts of the city, and you should look to them and see how disturbing the environment and transport there is.
I have the weekend here in Almaty, so I will definitely do this.
I tried to live there for some days, and it was a terrible experience for me.
And Tom, how is the air pollution for you? I mean, how you experience air pollution in Almaty?
Yesterday we cycled around Almaty, and it was fun. I had two great guides, Alima and Jelena. They showed me beautifully around, and we had a lot of fun riding through the city. But actually, I could smell the air pollution. So if you're not used, after a while you get used to it. You do not recognize it anymore. This is a normal human process. But if you arrive newly in a city, you can smell that the air is polluted. And this is what happened here.
In fact, Almaty is very polluted. I mean, it's even, I think it's one of the 10 most polluted cities in the world, as far as I know. So, am I right, Alekhan? So please come. But and I know that 80% of our air pollution comes from vehicles and from cars and transport.
It's actually coming in terms of numbers. It's only 60% according to the Almaty city reports, which were in 2019, if I'm not mistaken.
I have a question about the changes in the city. A lot of the streets, like the central avenues, were changed to one-way road instead of two-way road. Is it efficient, or it reminds me of the post-war America when they built those to avoid bombing or something? But is it good to change the direction of the street now to be needed?
I honestly do not know.
But most of our streets, Thomas, it's how to say it, what we have in Almaty means is, I mean, bigger streets and I mean, built in a kind of how we say it in German, in English, like this one. What is it? That? Yes, it's a Soviet heritage. I mean, during Stalin times, Soviet times. I mean, our Soviet authorities used to be larger streets because for military parades. Yes, it's for that regard. In that regard, so the streets were built that big and.
Yeah, I'm living in Magdeburg, and Magdeburg also has a Soviet style or many Soviet style streets because it belonged to the GDR. So I'm used to it. But what I like about Almaty, so you have this, you have the grid, and then you have the large streets defining the housing blocks. But in between, there are also some side streets which are very green, which are traffic calm. So sometimes you can go through there with a car, but it's just one lane and you cannot drive very fast. And honestly, this is a concept what Barcelona is trying to promote right now. They call it Superblocks. They also have a block of several houses, and in between those houses, it's traffic calmed, and you cannot go by car. You can just go there by car very slowly, and it's green, and people can sit and chat and everything there. And the blocks are connected to larger streets. You kind of already have it. And in Barcelona, they promote it as the next big thing. And now other European cities tend to adopt it. And here it is kind of already there to have a block of several houses and very calm inside areas.
So making roads smaller wouldn't be a part of a solution, right? So,
making roads smaller is always a part of the solution.
Mhm.
And if you have your roads within the blocks, you should count them as much as possible. And the larger road, it makes sense to have designated lanes for buses, so that the bus does not need to be wait in congestion, so we just can pass by the congestion, then it's getting more attractive to use the bus. And then if you have also bicycle lanes, you really narrow down the space for cars, and you provide an alternative which is fast, convenient, and secure. And by doing this, you transform a city to actually better.
So, another question: what do you make of bigger cars that we have in Almaty? I mean, perhaps you notice. I mean, one of the differences that we have with Magdeburg, for instance. So we in Almaty have much more bigger cars, like Mercedes, like I don't know. While you in Germany, so I mean, you don't tend to have bigger cars as such. So most people in Germany, they used to have. I mean, they like to have smaller cars.
Maybe it used to be like this, but for the last 5 to 6 years, SUVs, the sport utility vehicles, something like a Jeep, but it's not a Jeep, it's just a private car, they became very popular. So people really buy Jeep-like SUVs, like the Porsche Cayenne, for instance. And then there are smaller versions of those cars, but those type of cars are very, very popular. And sales in this segment
But they're popular with elder people, right? Yeah, they're popular with elder people or with young people as well.
Buying a car is popular with elder people, and younger people tend to buy a little bit less cars, but it's not that it's a real big trend in Germany. So it can be much more. It's more that they are not inclining in car purchases, but they are also not really declining.
So does anyone have their questions so far? Oh, I really enjoyed listening to this lecture of Dr. Tom Assman, and I would like to thank everyone who was joining and who joined us and listened to our lecture. And again, I would like to thank the Kazakh-German University for creating this wonderful area for delivering such important messages as DKU-Talks. And thank you again, and see you in the recent future. And I really want to express my congratulations on you for bringing the first cargo bikes to Kazakhstan, and I hope we will all see your presentation on Monday, and we're really looking forward to expand this important issue for Kazakh cities.
Also, my behalf, so thank you much, Alejandro, for being the moderator. Yes, and thank you to you, Thomas. It was very great to listen to you. Thanks for your input and for your presentation. Yeah.
I also would like to thank for the opportunity, and I hope that we meet back again very soon to discuss those issues, to have a test ride of the cargo bike, or maybe to even have some more cargo bikes. And if you have any questions, just send me an email. Also, within the audience, please.
Thanks to everyone. Yeah, thanks for that.
Okay, thank you. And the short version of this session you can find soon on our website. And again, if you have any questions, just email me or Dr. Assman. Thank you, everyone. See you soon, I hope. Bye.